Okay, it is 5 o'clock. We'll gavel into session here. Call the meeting to order. And are there any public comment on the closed session agenda items? Okay, then we will recess to closed session.
President Holt.
Present.
Vice President Welch.
Present.
Clerk Strickler. Present. Trustee Dowd.
Present.
Trustee Ross.
Present.
If you'll join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No action was taken in closed session. And I'm sorry, this is President Holt still speaking. No action was taken in closed session. And I move to approve the agenda.
I'll second that.
I thank you, Vice President Wedge. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item 7A. So that is the IB program presentation.
So this is Michelle Garcia speaking, and the trustees requested some information about the International Baccalaureate program. So principals Dr. Wright and Mayberry will discuss what they know about the IB program.
Looks like it's just the screen behind you, ladies. Okay.
Are we ready? Okay. Good evening, President Holt, trustees, Superintendent Designee Lucci Garcia, staff and guests. Principal Mayberry and I are honored to present to you this evening. At the request of the board, we are presenting an informational presentation on the International Baccalaureate program. While creating this presentation, I expanded the topic to cover a broader topic called real-world learning. Real-world learning combines classroom-based instruction with skill-building, hands-on learning experiences. I've just remembered to go slower. This type of learning allows students to connect their interests to real-world opportunities by participating in problem-based learning across a multitude of subjects, including science, math, engineering, computers, civic engagement, and more. Many educational programs found within schools today are centered around collaboration, communication, problem solving, and engaging students in authentic, relevant problems, projects, and experiences that develop career awareness and readiness. We are here tonight to present on two such programs, the International Baccalaureate Program and Project Lead the Way. The International Baccalaureate Program includes 4 programs that aim to develop inquiring, knowledgeable, and caring young people who are motivated to succeed. The 4 programs are the Primary Years Program, which is offered to students who are 3 to 12 years old. The Middle Years Program, offered to students who are 11 to 16 years old. And the Diploma Program and career-related programs for students who are 16 to 19 years old. The IB program provides students with opportunities to build their critical thinking skills, nurture their curiosity, and strengthen their ability to solve complex real-world problems. Each of the 4 IB programs provides a detailed and developmentally appropriate curriculum framework that is broad, balanced, conceptual, and connected. In all IB programs, teaching is based on inquiry, focused on conceptual understanding, and centered around effective teamwork and collaboration. Throughout all IB programs, students develop approaches to learning skills and the attributes of the IB learner profile. The learner profile describes a broad range of human capacities and responsibilities that go beyond academic success. These 10 attributes imply a commitment to all members of the school community to learn to respect themselves, others, and the world around them. The aim of all IB programs is to develop internationally minded students, people, who recognize that their common humanity and shared guardianship for the planet. An IB education further enhances the development of international mindedness through multilingualism. All IB programs require students to study more than one language. To teach IB programs, schools must become authorized. Every school authorized to offer an IB program is known as an IB World School. The road to authorization is a multi-year process and includes the following steps. The first step is the consideration phase. During this phase, the school learns about and analyzes the IB's philosophy and structure and gets to know the requirements of the program. The school compares the IB expectations with their current situation to determine the tasks that will be needed to implement the program. At the end of the consideration phase, the school will be able to make an informed decision on whether to apply to become an IB World School. If a school intends to start the authorization process, it must complete several professional development activities during this phase. The average cost for an IB workshop is $1,000 for in-person and estimated $550 for virtual workshops. During the consideration phase, the school will incur the following costs: the fees for professional development and the fees required to submit the application for candidacy. The application for candidacy fee is $4,000 and includes access to an IB consultant, 20 hours of remote support per year, a 2-day consultation visit, a consultation visit report, access to the Program Resource Center, and direct support from the authorization department. The next step would be the candidacy phase. During this phase, the school will deepen its knowledge of the IB philosophy and the program as it takes actions necessary to meet the requirements. Candidacy can be a very busy period as the school community completes the training required, collaborates to develop and update policies and curriculums, refines or establishes new processes and practices, and continues to explore how the IB will be implemented within the school's context. The school will be assigned an IB consultant to provide support and guidance. Completion of the required professional development is a significant part of the candidacy phase. When the school has completed the various tasks necessary, it will decide whether it is ready for authorization. During this candidacy phase, the school may incur the following costs. The annual candidate school fee is $9,500. Professional development fees and costs related to the consultation visit. The third step is the request for authorization phase. During this phase, the school completes the application and assembles the requested supporting documents. The school will begin initial planning for the verification visit. The purpose of the verification visit is to confirm that the school has taken all necessary actions to meet the requirements for authorization. During this phase, the school will incur the following costs. The annual candidate school fee is $9,500 per year until the school is authorized. Once a school is authorized, each year, an IB World School pays a fee for each program that they are authorized to teach and can pay certain one-off fees for other purposes, such as evaluation visits, which happen every 4 or 5 years, depending on where you are in the process. The annual fee for a primary years program, which is TK5, is $8,500. And the annual fee for middle years, which is your grade 6-8, is $10,050. Next, I will talk about Project Lead the Way. Project Lead the Way is an innovative project-based learning program that incorporates science, technology, engineering, and math. This program is centered around a problem-based approach to teaching and learning. It truly embodies critical thinking by empowering our students to discover and explore their interests. The lessons encourage our students to imagine and design solutions to real-world challenges. Project Lead the Way consists of the following curricula. There is the launch program that's offered in TK through 5th grade. This curriculum taps into students' exploratory nature, engages them in learning that feels like play, and encourages them to keep discovering. Students are immersed in hands-on activities, projects, and problems that build upon each other and relate to the real world. They experience integrated learning that blends computer science, engineering, biomedical science, and more. Throughout the modules, even the youngest learners apply math and language skills. They learn science to standards and adopt skills that are foundational across disciplines. The Gateway program is offered for students in 6th through 8th grade. This curriculum is created to open paths that create meaningful futures for our students. Through explorations of coding and robotics, flight and space, human body systems, and more, Project Lead the Way Gateway fuels students' passion for discovery. As they engage in hands-on collaborative problem-solving focused on real-world challenges, students use and stretch their imaginations in brand new ways and connect their learning to life. All the while, students step into roles spanning the career landscape, which is a crucial experience during this transitional time in their lives. For the high school level, there are 3 pathways for students to choose from. Computer science, engineering, and biomedical sciences are offered in high school. The steps to become a Project Lead the Way school include the following. For Project Lead the Way launch schools for grades TK5, the first cost is professional development. Core training immerses teachers in a hands-on collaborative learning environment, challenges them to look at their classrooms in a new way, and empowers them to bring learning to life. The average cost for professional development is about $500 per teacher. The second cost is the annual participation fee. Project Lead the Way schools participate on an annual basis with a year-long uninterrupted access to hands-on relevant curriculum for teachers and students. The annual fee for launch schools is $950. The third cost is to purchase the modules. The average cost of one module is $1,600, which includes the durables and consumables for year one. In subsequent years, the cost to replace your consumables is estimated to be around $100 per module. For Project Lead the Way Gateway schools for grades 6-8, the cost is roughly the same to elementary. Professional development is slightly higher at an average of $750 per teacher, and the annual participation fee is the same at $950, and the cost of the modules are estimated to be the same at $1,600. In November 2021, 2 elementary schools in AUSD began the journey to become Project Lead the Way schools. Both Rock Creek and Skyridge schools created 5-year plans that focused on problem-based learning, STEAM, and real-world learning. After meeting with representatives from Project Lead the Way and allocating our ESSER funds to support the initial costs, both sites were eager to pilot the program. This past fall, 15 members from AUSD elementary schools completed launch training taught by our very own Mr. Aaron Kins. Mr. Kins is a certified launch lead teacher who trained our staff. The initial training is 16 hours where staff are trained in developing the conceptual and instructional understanding needed to guide students. Additionally, with the use of our ESSER funds, 12 modules were purchased and launch teachers have access to implement these modules. The cost of these 12 modules was roughly $8,000. Principal Morris, Mr. Kins, and I are currently working on professional development schedule for fall of 2023 so that all of our elementary teachers at both sites will be trained. Additionally, Principal Morris and I have prepared for a second order consisting of additional 20 modules for grades TK5. We will be using our ESSER funds and it is estimated to be $13,000. Now I will hand it over to Principal Mayberry to discuss recommendations for next steps.
Thank you, Dr. Balsana-Wright. Good evening, President Wedge, or President Holt, excuse me, Vice President Wedge, Board of Trustees and Admin Designee, Michelle Lucci Garcia. The IB, so I'm here to speak about the IB program and that I was an IB teacher in high school. So my experience is implementing and the training and moving it from the beginning phase to it being used in a school. IB, as Dr. Wright mentioned, is a continuous program meeting students at all grade levels. So as she mentioned, it's TK all the way through high school and beyond with career related programs. So as she mentioned, there are 4 programs. What I'm kind of looking for IB to do here through AUSD is to increase enrollment and really build a partnership with Placer Union High School District. How do we do that? The goal here would start with the MYP, that's the middle years program. As the middle school currently offering that program, the only schools that are doing that now are down the hill. So any student that wants to do that has to travel down the hill. My goal would be to keep them here in our district. The vertical alignment building with Placer Union High School District, E.V. King could also act as a feeder school to Colfax High School. Colfax High School is part of the Placer Union High School District, and it is the only one that's the only high school in that district that offers the IB program in high school for the diploma program. Now there's more, as Dr. Wright mentioned, there's a primary years program ages 3 to 12 that could potentially also boost enrollment throughout the district, giving AUSD the reputation of being an IB district, which if you're familiar and really know what I'm talking about, that is a very prestigious honor to be recognized as an IB school, not alone an IB district. Again, the programs for middle school and TK5 are also down the hill. What I think I appreciate most about the IB program is that it kind of answers the kids' question of, I'm not smart. Yeah, you are smart, but how are you smart? And IB really develops that because of the different pathways that they have. They have the talents in art or reading or music, but in an totally academic based school, a traditional school, those students, their interests are maybe not academic, but they need the academics to really flourish in that. The IB program does offer that. Right now, if we were to do this for Evie Kane. We do have an art pathway kind of that could kind of fit in pretty nicely, and also a language pathway, which both are extracurriculars, but they're also going to get the interest for the students to build those academic skills and be successful as they continue on to the IB program in Colfax or at Placer High School. There are 8 domains for students to demonstrate how they are smart. And this is another thing that I'm very passionate and really enjoy the IB program, is that it hits on so many other things besides just the academics or just the sciences. There's language acquisition. I can expand on more if you guys want me to, but I just want to give you the 8 domains, and then you can ask questions and ask for more information if you need to. The 8 domains are language acquisition. We do offer currently Spanish, so we actually meet that criteria right now that we have to offer at least one target language. Language and literature, individuals and societies, sciences, mathematics, arts, physical and health education, and design. So those are the 8 domains. It's a little different than Project Lead the Way, but I do like it because it is a little more inclusive and that there's a broader range of talents and skills for all of our students, not just ones in a science or engineering or math-based thing. That's all I've got for you. Any questions for either me or Dr. Balsano Wright?
I'm just curious, Project Lead the Way, so if we were to look at that at the middle school, that still includes foreign language component to it as well. Does that give us a little bit more flexibility with curriculum than, say, the IB program would? I'm sorry, let me say that again. This is President Holt. I had my microphone off. Just considering, Project Lead the Way and the IB programs, do we have a little bit more control maybe of the curriculum with Project Lead the Way versus the IB? And I'm just wondering, is there an emphasis on languages the same way?
Could you, for me, could you clarify more control over the program? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Sorry. So basically, are we just getting an IB curriculum handed to us and we follow that with the IB schools? Okay.
No,
No.
you're not.
Okay.
You get those 8 domains,
Mhm.
and from there that's why there's so much training and professional development and the candidacy and all of those things before you can roll with it. And then Dr. Wright could talk about that.
IB doesn't have a curriculum that they hand you. You are following your state standards and you are developing the units in which are in those 8 domains. So there is a requirement for interdisciplinary across like a math teacher and a language arts teacher need to build a unit together. And there are units that are required just solo math and just solo lang and lit and individuals and societies, which is their title for social studies. So it's not a curriculum. Where Project Lead the Way, we're still following the state standards. We still use our board adopted curriculum. The Project Lead the Way modules are a great way to supplement or add to the work that is provided through the curriculum. So for example, I know our 2nd grade teachers were ending their year on this Rosie robotics unit in 2nd grade, this just the last week of school. So, and the kids were loving it. So that it was just a great kind of hands-on project. I know Mrs. North at Skyridge did her unit as well. So it's a great way to supplement and add to our science, math, technology, engineering.
Thank
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And if I could just add, this is Christine, Principal Mayberry talking. If I could just add to a lot of the disciplines and the content areas, they have a continuum. So for example, the language acquisition continuum, not every student would start at the beginning. It's geared to what the student already knows and has. And I only know about language acquisition because that's what I taught. I taught Spanish. So the other ones I believe are similar, but Dr. Wright, you might be able to.
It is.
Okay, so there we go.
Thank you.
This is Trustee Ross. And first of all, I just want to applaud you for your passion because you can see the passion coming through. I really love that you're interested in this. And thank you so much for Project Lead the Way coming to our schools because it has been so wonderful this year. I have 3 questions. And my first question is this more adaptive for ESL students, or is this a little more difficult? Is there more or less training that's involved, or it's just all a part of the program?
So I do know that with the Project Lead the Way modules and every piece is also in Spanish as well. So it lends to that piece for those students and teachers. I believe personally that it gets those kids, our English learners talking and collaborated and speaking and doing, that reading piece and that writing piece in a very engaging way. So I would say it really brings them right along. So.
Awesome.
Okay,
Yes.
add to that.
And I'm going to add to that too. It already helps just with the good teaching. Assisting ESL that's good teaching when you do that. So IB curriculum especially will do that just because it is so student-centered and focus-centered. The teacher at an IB school is more of a facilitator instead of just a lecture or that direct instruction. So that gives you a picture.
I love that. My second question is, you said all of the IB schools right now are currently down the hill. Do we have elementary IB schools and we have middle schools and high schools already?
Yes, there's one in Colfax. There are two IB schools in Roseville Joint Union, Oakmont High School and Granite Bay High School. And I know I'm going to have Dr. Wright talk about there's two in Loomis. There's a middle school in Roseville at Ike Middle School.
Oh.
And then
okay.
the littles, I don't know where the littles go.
So there is Sierra Elementary in Rockland. That is a TK or K6. That's IB. There are the TK8 schools. There are two of them in Loomis. I don't believe Colfax has an elementary school.
No, I don't.
No, I think they just have the high school. And then you have Ike Middle School in Roseville. That's Sierra. Oh, another one in, is it Miraloma?
There's one in El Dorado County too. I forget which
Okay.
one, but
Okay. And then my third and last and final question, sorry. Do we currently have the capacity, given all these changes, to actually train our staff, educators, teachers? Would this be something we would maybe possibly start looking for in the next year, 2, 3 years? And do we have the capacity to do that currently?
So absolutely. And one thing I do like about the IB program is that it is a big commitment once you're there. So if you're not willing to do the work to get there, we will know. And unfortunately, this is not something I would love to go tell my staff, like, guess what, you guys are going to be in IB school next year. Even though I'm so excited, I can't, it's not a one-woman show. So you really need to have that support from all of the teachers willing to teach those sections. So the way that they have the candidacy and the authorization, I think it's a really good step because it really gives everybody a really true, transparent picture of what you're getting yourself into. So when you finally get through it, it's like, wow, we're here and now we're ready to go because now we know what it all is. It's really not a trial by fire. It's trial as you're figuring it out to see if you want to do it. So I hope that helps.
It's a multi-year process. It took us 3 years before we were authorized in Loomis, and there is a feasibility study out there that you can start as a district. If you go to the IB website, ibworld.org, I think, or something like that, there is a feasibility study. So it talks about the financials and all the things that is this possible? I highly recommend that.
And are you both inspired for us to maybe become an IB middle school?
It
this
is
an inspiration
so
for us?
amazing for staff and students. I'm going to answer yes to both Project Lead the Way and IB.
Okay.
Is that the recommendation that we would continue the investment in Project Lead the Way at the elementary level and then IB for middle school? I wasn't entirely clear what the.
The reason why I kind of added the Project Lead the Way in is I know we have some new board members, and I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of the work that has been put in since 2021. We've had conversations. And so last year I just wanted to lift that work up and bring it to the forefront. So the direction I think truly honestly needs to come from the staff and see what they're ready for in order to have a successful any initiative. It needs to be, I think, grassroots. And so that would be my recommendation.
Trustee Dowd, so what is the process to make sure that Auburn Elementary has the same credentials that Rock Creek had, or are we preparing Auburn Elementary
For Project Lead the Way?
for project?
Yeah.
Thank you for Project Lead the Way.
Yes, this is Dr. Wright for the first time. I remember to do it all night. So we are definitely ensuring that as we transition and consolidate schools, because we have some new hires coming at Skyridge and we have some new staff coming over to, from Rock Creek to Auburn, and we want to make sure that everybody is. So I just was in talks today with Michelle Lucci Garcia about what that will look like in the fall. And so we're working all those professional development pieces out to ensure that Project Lead the Way continues at both sites of the elementary sites.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And so, Renee, trustee Dowd again, for new teachers that come in, is it something where we have to ensure that they're already certified for this, or do they already get it as soon as they come into our district? What is their
The training for them.
process?
Yeah, no, we can train. Absolutely. We have our own launch lead teacher, Mr. Kins, who was fantastic. So he's amazing. And he led the PD for us last year. And I'd like to actually see capacity built with that. So once you become trained and then you teach one module, we can have more teachers become launch lead teachers. So we're not just relying on, one teacher teaching. So we could turn around and, if we get a new hire, we can train them to continue the program. Yeah.
All right, Vice President Wedge, a couple questions I have. What has the feedback been? Because obviously this has been going on for a little bit, as far as from the teachers so far that has actually been learning this program.
Lead the way.
Mhm.
I believe, sorry, this is Dr. Wright again. I believe it's what I've seen in the classroom. It's very engaging, very positive. The training is 16 hours and the staff, they had fun. You saw the pictures there. It was, Monica, were you at the training? Okay, great. I'm going to lean on Monica Peak for this one. So she was at the training. It was engaging. You walk through some of the modules that the students, you kind of become the student in that productive struggle of how to solve this real world problem. And they turn around and then teach it to their students. And I believe it sparks curiosity. It sparks inquiry. They get thinking and wondering and talking and collaborating and teamwork. So I'm going to think that it's very positive. Were you able to teach one of those modules this year? No, not yet. Okay. Next year we'll get you. Yes. Not yet. Not yet. Yes.
Okay.
So.
And then my next question is, if the district decides to move in this direction and potentially becomes an IB district, could this be a potential to open up where educators would seek out to want to teach in this district?
Again, I think Principal Mayberry touched on this. As an IB teacher, or even any teacher who steps in and teaches project-based learning, because that's really what this is, that real world learning, you become so wrapped up in seeing your kids blossom and grow and excited that it invigorates you. You get that feedback, you get that energy from the students. So I think that's enticing for hiring and retaining staff. I think that that's exciting. You do become, the phrase was, you're no longer, the sage on the stage or the guide on the side. So you guide the learning, and you are, a lot of times you want those kids working harder than you during that lesson, and you're not doing all that talking. So I think for teachers, it's very inspiring, motivating.
So this, potentially could open up where this would be a district that is sought after to bring in.
Oh, I believe so. And just like Principal Mayberry said, it's highly sought after, just the name to become an IB World School.
And then my last question is, I think you mentioned Colfax is the IB school right now.
The high school.
The high school is
Mhm.
Colfax High, but not Auburn,
Placer.
but not Placer High.
Correct. And I remember this conversation when I was back in Loomis, when we were looking at Placer Union, because the school that I used to teach at was the TK8 feeder into Del Oro. And they were talking about, okay, let's expand this program at the high school level. And Placer Union chose one school to have that at. And I remember they were talking about, would it be Del Oro? Would it be Forest Hill? Would it be Colfax? And for whatever reason, they chose Colfax. So a student who was at my site or Frank Little Elementary or Placer in Loomis, if they want to continue that continuum up to the diploma program, then they would get, have their student attend Colfax.
Okay, and then so say a student goes up through 8th grade, and then the only option they have is here in Auburn, the high school here, Placer High. could that be a step back in the wrong direction for them? Could it be challenging for them, or would they be able to adapt to, the type of programs they offer at Placer?
And I think that kind of goes back to the vertical alignment that I'd like to build between our district and Placer Union High School District. Knowing that we'd be working with them, and you also can do an interdistrict transfer. I'm not saying, so please don't say that I'm saying that Colvac's going to let everybody in. But when you offer programs that cannot be found in your home school and it's with our district, there is that opportunity to do that. But again, that would be something that I would really like to build, because I certainly would want our students to have that option to continue if they wanted to continue with the diploma program in high school. So could they say, no, they can't come here? I guess they could, but hopefully this would really be a collaboration between our two districts with the teachers, really building that vertical alignment to really, like, this is what we'd be known for up here. And that's kind of how I see it. But again, it's only on paper, and we know everything looks good on paper. So.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to acknowledge that several of our schools have been engaged in project-based learning for some time, including Alta Vista. That was one of the things that was known for as a charter. I think Skyridge has also been doing, I don't mean to undersell, there might have been other elementary schools that were taking that approach. So and so I don't want to, I think it's important to honor that there has already been some training, and sometimes I think as educators, it's tiring to hear about like another change and another thing. And so I guess I'm wondering how we can capitalize on what kind of where we are right now, and the various types of training, like the project Lead the Way and the project-based learning work that's happened. Does that all support IB ultimately? Like, if you were a project Lead the Way trained teacher, would you be in a better position to then teach at an IB school? I don't want to lose what we've invested a lot in various programs already, and I don't want to lose those investments.
Absolutely. And I don't believe that we would lose the investments, because the training of our staff and the engaging lessons that our students have received is all part of that investment. But that's what your question is, exactly why there's such a process for even determining if IB is going to work for the district, because really, from what I understand, IB happens on the ground level. Are the families and the staff even willing to engage in this type of a long-term program, right? And so that so again, I don't believe that we would lose any investment, because every time we offer PD or hands-on learning, or we we want our teachers to be facilitators of learning, because then they don't go home tired, right? So all of that training that we've done so far, I don't believe that would be lack of investment, because our staff is where they are because of it. Would they be willing, though, to take on a new project? That would be something that we would have to figure out. Absolutely.
No other questions from the board? All right. Well, thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Oh, and this is President Holt still. Now on to item 7B, the presentation from the fiscal crisis management assistance team.
Good evening. This is CBO Leslie, and with us tonight is Shailene Hart and Michelle Giacobini from FCMAT, or the Fiscal Crisis Management and Assistant Team. They were referred, as you know, with our letter of going concern from Placer County Office of Education, and they're here tonight to go over their report of the fiscal health analysis for Auburn Union.
All right. Well, good morning. Or good morning. Sorry. Good evening, President Holt, Vice President Wedge, trustees, and Superintendent Designee Lucci Garcia. Thank you so much for having us here this evening to present the findings of our report. My name is Shailene Hart, and I'm joined this evening by my colleague, Michelle Giacomini, who is my partner in this study. So just to give you a little bit of background on FCMAT and who we are as an organization, we were established back in 1992 when a school district in California actually went insolvent. So they weren't able to make payroll and needed to take an emergency appropriation. So out of that legislation, FICMAT was born, but that same legislation strengthened the fiscal oversight of schools by requiring more transparency and more frequent reporting out. So it's because of that that you have things like your first and second interim reporting, so that things are up to date, and the district's fiscal status is known throughout the school year, as well as keeping the county office and the state informed along the way. So FICMAT stands for the Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistance Team. And a lot of people really want to focus on the fiscal crisis part of our name. And yes, we're involved in that, but that's not why we came to Auburn. Management assistance is actually a majority of the work that we do. And that's when we're invited in to take a look at a particular operational area and then offer findings and recommendations for improvement or increasing efficiencies in that area. Sorry, can we go to the next one? I forgot you're doing that. So normally we don't engage in a district until we're invited in, but with the 2018-19 Budget Act, we were actually written into some legislation to offer some more proactive services by automatically engaging with a district if they hit any one of 5 triggers, which you can see bulleted there. I believe we're on that. Yes, we are. There on that slide. And in any one of those situations, it triggers our agency to perform what's called a fiscal health risk analysis, or an FHRA, to determine the district's risk for fiscal insolvency. So we naturally build on the county office's oversight process, and there's no cost to the district or the county office. So we visited Auburn because you were given a lack of going concern designation by the county office. And so the county office in their letter kind of outlined things over the last couple of years, but really they cited concerns that have grown over time and continue to grow with no corrections as their basis for that determination, triggering us to come in and do the FHRA. So let me tell you just a little bit about our tool. Our tool has been available for years on our website. It's free of charge for any school district to use out there. It identifies 20 areas that we've identified that's important to a district's fiscal health. And we've developed that over the course of the 30 years we've been in existence and our work with districts who have had financial difficulties. So there's 136 questions in the tool. You answer each one with a yes, no, or a not applicable, and your risk accumulates only when the answer is no. So it's pretty much like a game of golf. You want the lowest score possible, right? But even the best functioning school district out there is not going to score a 0 or probably anywhere close to that, right? Because every district has something to work on. But what you would hope is that you would fall into the low risk category. And you can see by the table on that particular slide that the high risk is 40% or more, moderate is 25 to 39.9%, and low risk is 24.9%. Okay, hold right there because that's my next one. Sorry. And so in determining Auburn's fiscal risk, Michelle and I visited your district back in April. And we used your first interim report as the basis for this report, okay? We asked your district to provide all kinds of documentation up front, and I just want to say a big thank you to Superintendent Designee Luchi Garcia, Heather Leslie, and the staff, because everybody was extremely cooperative. And when people came into interviews, they were very open and just really had the district's best interests at heart. And we could see that throughout the interview. So that felt really good because we don't always see that in every district. So I just want to applaud you and your staff and everybody that was involved in that. So we came and we did those documents up front to kind of front load us and let us prepare for interviews. We came on site for a couple of days. We left and did a couple more Zoom interviews and then did our deeper analysis and put together the tool and the report so that you could see where your district fell. We write to a deficit model, so we're not going to be telling you everything wonderful that your district does, right? So on this tool, if it's marked a yes, it means you're doing well or you're in compliance. So really, we focus on the no's. Those are the ones that increase your risk. And with every single one of those, we're going to give a very brief explanation as to why the district received a no in that question. So just like your financial information is a snapshot in time, our FHRA is as well. And don't forget, it was based on your first interim, right? And some other things have happened. So since then, you've already had second interim, you're getting ready to adopt your budget for next year. But this one kind of is a look back in time as to where you were at first interim and when that lack of going concern designation came into play. So I like this slide because it's a chart that very quickly summarizes the responses for your district. So the no's, remember, are the ones that accumulate the risk. So that's where you would want to kind of focus. Okay. And so you can see the major risk factors for Auburn in the areas that we're going to be highlighting tonight. And so we're going to take just a few minutes to talk about some things in each one of those sections. And then we'll take some questions at the end if you have them. Okay. And so I'm going to turn it over to Michelle at this time, and she's going to come up and take the next part.
A few minutes was her reminder to me. Yes, it was.
And I do have to say that your staff was extremely helpful. I have to tell you that some nights Heather and I were talking on email as I was asking follow-up questions at 10 at night, 10:30 at night. So, and really we got all the information we needed. There's oftentimes we do FHRAs that we do not get information at all. So it was very, very helpful. So I'm going to go through, if you can go to the next slide, thank you, in a little more detail, some of the areas. Remember, there are 20 areas or sections in the FHRA. I'm going to talk about 8 of them. And we were given about 2 hours tonight, right? No, I'm just kidding. You have the report and you have the PowerPoint. So I'm just going to talk about really kind of the importance of 8 of those areas because you scored high. Your percentage is high in 8 of these areas. So when we talk about that, you scored a 48.4%, that your percentage, basically 37.1% of that is in 8 of these areas. So I'm going to talk about 8 of those areas really, really quickly. Not so much what the bullets say, because you have the bullets, but why they're so important. Okay, just to kind of give you an idea. So the first one is budget development and adoption. So let's talk about that, because you're right in the middle of that right now, right? We're in June. That's what you're doing as a board. It's your fiduciary responsibility. It's a big one. And sometimes I think as we move around the state, boards don't really always understand that responsibility. You're brought this really ugly report, the SACS document, and we as CBOs do our best to explain what all those numbers mean to you, but it's not a pretty document usually. It's a lot of numbers. And so, you know, we as a CBO need to do our best to try to explain those numbers to you as much as possible. And that's what a lot of these questions are in the FHRA. And so what you'll see what some of those no's are is just that we need to make sure that you are getting more information, right, and explaining some of those assumptions. But I also want to remind you as a board, as part of your responsibility is if you don't feel that some of the variances have enough explanation or the criteria and standards, you need to ask questions. So I just want to put that out to you as well. It's really important because in the end, your score is so high in this FHRA, you are at risk of insolvency, right? If this continues. So we want to make sure that you're asking the questions that you have too. And I know I sound like I'm scolding you. I have 6 sons, so I do scold a lot, but this score is a high risk. So we just really want to point those things out to you that are really important. Next slide, please. And my papers are out of order, which is why I keep looking this way. This next slide just really talks about some other things that you want to be aware of is that funds have been returned to the CDE because they weren't spent. And so that's concerning in itself, right? And that things have been sent to your county office late. And I want to explain that to you because things have been sent at the deadline for budget, for instance, on 7/1, but your county office does want hard copies, which is understandable. That's a requirement. And so often there are things that the hard copies aren't necessarily sent right away because they want additional things and corrections. So that's what this is talking about. Now, your county office does send a letter after they approve the adopted budget, after they approve the interims. And so that talks about a lot of these types of things. So I'm sure you're seeing those letters. So those are things that you should be aware of. Okay, next one. Yes.
Is it okay to ask questions? Just a simple question. This is Trustee Ross. What is a reason to have funds returned? Like why would funds be returned? Obviously, if they're not spent, but like, is that a part of a budget
issue, but they're in the budget and we don't spend them, or there's the timing, or like, why would we not spend?
I'd have to be guessing because we didn't do the research. Sometimes it's because they weren't spent by the deadline.
Okay.
That's normally what it is that there was a deadline to spend the funds and they weren't spent by that deadline. So I'm
And
going
they're
to guess
probably
that's what they were.
specific funds for
For a specific
area.
reason. So maybe, again, I'm guessing, okay, but maybe they were supposed to be spent, but in this case, they were for specific programs. I can tell you what they were for. They were for specific programs.
There was a significant one. It was 50,000 for an after-school program that was
Right.
unspent. The others were, I mean, not that this is okay, but they were 5,000 or under. They were relatively small.
Yeah, but I would say you never
Yeah.
want to return funds.
Oh, absolutely not.
One
Especially
was
not in our,
Auburn
given
and
our
one was for-
financial.
Right, but
position.
you didn't spend the funds by the required deadline, so they had to be returned.
Is that a common thing in districts or no, not at all? That's why we're high risk.
Well, no, you're high risk because you had enough no's that it made you high risk. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 no's aren't going to make you high risk. Your number of no's made you high risk. Does that make sense? I mean, you can have no's and not be high risk. It's your number of no's that made you high risk.
And is this a common no? I mean, is this a common thing, returning funds?
No. Okay. So budget monitoring and updates, I want to tell you that the reason this area is so critical is once you approve your budget, adopt your budget, that's such an important piece, but now you need to keep it updated. That's your next important thing, right? Because you've already approved your expenditure plan, that adopted budget. Now it's time to keep it updated. So we saw several negative budgets, a lot of negative budgets, right? And so that's important. You want to make sure your budget keeps being updated. And so a negative budget in itself isn't unusual. Sometimes we have to get things through. And so that is okay. I mean, all CBOs usually have negative budgets. That's not unusual. But then it's going back and making sure we keep them updated. Right. So in itself, it's just a process, right? It's just a process that we have to go through. So it's just knowing that we keep that budget updated all the time. We want to make sure our current budget always reflects our most current expenditure and revenue plan. So that's what's critical here. If a budget never changes from your adopted budget on through the rest of the year, you know that you have a problem and your budget is changing as the year goes on. But we want to make sure that we don't see a lot of negatives in your budget as it goes through. We want to make sure our budget keeps being updated as the year goes on. So we point out many different things. We point out, on your, and you will see this in your SACS budget, the criterion standards. We want to see good explanations of variances. And these are the types of questions and answers you're going to see as you go through the FHRA. So these are the types of questions that are being asked in that FHRA and the things that we're pointing out. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the same types of things. Again, another one from the county office about things not being returned timely. And again, this has to do with their requirement of hard copies. And so sometimes it's frustrating as it might be of what a county office requirement might be. A county office requirement is a county office requirement. So we just have to work harder with that. Okay, next one is cash management. And so on this one, it's not cash, as we know, is one of the most critical things we have in the school district, because if we run out of cash, we're in a lot of trouble, and a school board is going to no longer be, right? You're going to not have any governance authority anymore, but you're not, cash is not really an issue in this FHRA because you don't have enough cash. That's really not the issue. The no's in this area, one was because of cash reconciliations in your ASB account. If we were to have done this next year, you wouldn't have this finding anymore. It's been taken care of. The bank recs have been done. That was a problem from the last couple of years. They've been caught up. So this one was a timing issue. The others had to do with your cash flow reconciliations were for 1 year at a time. And while we were here, staff was already working on doing an 18-month cash reconciliation. So that was already in play. And that had nothing to do with FCMAT's visit, but at the time of our field work, it wasn't completed. So we had to mark you down for that. So that was the other two findings in that area. If we had come 2 months later, that one would have been a yes. So
It seemed that you were recommending 2 years though. Is that,
18 months to 2 years, yeah.
okay, so 18 months is sufficient?
Yeah, so
Okay.
all three of these, if we had come later, would have been fine. So just so you know, that this had to do with the timing of our visit right here. Okay, next slide. Collective bargaining. So in collective bargaining, a number of issues. The first one, of course, had to do with your certificated bargaining unit. We were just here a little early. That one had already been settled just a little bit after. It hadn't come to you at the board yet, so we had to mark you down as a no. Again, timing can be very difficult. But as you can imagine, collective bargaining when it comes to a district's fiscal health is critical. I mean, that's the majority of your budget. So we as FICMAT and a fiscal health risk analysis tool really look at collective bargaining very, very closely. And so there were a number of areas and a number of no's in this area of it. We would like to see some additional calculations kind of kept back a little bit more on where the numbers come from when the calculations are done of what a settlement will actually cost. I think that's actually on the next slide, but it doesn't matter. No, that's actually on this slide. So that's what's on this slide. Next slide, please, if you don't mind. And then another no had to do with, because back in 21-22, the raise that was actually given to the unions was higher than what the COLA was. And that definitely gets a no, right? Because when you're negotiating with your staff, giving a raise higher than COLA, you can imagine that's what starts happening with deficit spending. You can definitely see a trend there of what was going to start. So that definitely is an indicator of risk there. And then when it comes to the order of signing those AB 1200 disclosures that come to you when you do negotiations, although all parties are signing, including the board, the superintendent, and the CBO, we need to see the CBO and the superintendent signing them before the board signs it. So I know that seems like a technicality. We just need to see it signed a little differently because of how the government code is actually worded. So that's what that no is about. Thank you. Deficit spending, as you can imagine, is another one of those important areas on the FHRA. And although you weren't deficit spending in 2021 or 21-22, that's where that ended. Then the deficit spending started after that. Now, you have put together a fiscal recovery plan. You've taken several actions this year. So I would imagine, and I'm guessing, hopefully when you bring your adopted budget forward and your multi-year projections, things will look different next year. I don't know. I've not seen your numbers, so I'm totally guessing at this point, right? But at the time of when we were here and looking at all the numbers, definitely we have triggers of no in this FHRA. So that's where this is coming from. Go to the next slide, please. Enrollment and attendance. You definitely have no answers in this area. Of course, one is because you're deficit spend. One is because you are declining in enrollment, and you're declining in enrollment at a very high rate, which you are aware of, higher than probably the rest of your county. But that's something you're also aware of. You also don't have very good processes or procedures of how attendance reconciliations or CBEDS monitoring is going on as it flows through the chain from your school sites to your district office and then to submittal. So we're really concerned about that. So that's what your other no's are in this area, as well as your attendance findings in your audit. So this is definitely an area that has to be strengthened. As you all know, or I'm sure you all know, attendance, CBEDS, that's what drives funding in the school district, in every school district.
And I
So such a
apologize.
critical area.
You said that was the process itself, the process between the schools and admin.
Well, from the school sites. So first we have to make sure that it's being taken correctly at the school sites as it's being recorded and reconciled at the school sites. And then at the district office, as all that information comes to the district office, that it's reconciled correctly at the district offices, all the school sites are being combined. So we have many processes, right? It's done at the school site. Is it done right there? And then as it's all combined at the district office, is it done correctly here? That's attendance. But then we have a CBEDS process too. That's a whole separate process for our CalPads.
Is that something we're trained on through the county Or is that something we train ourselves on? Or you should just know that because you've been through the school?
It's different everywhere.
Gotcha.
Here in your school district, it's pretty much trained by the county at this point. I don't think it's changed. Heather, has it?
The only thing that we have changed this last fiscal year is, we previously. CBO Leslie here. The only thing that's changed really on this is, from what I understand, the past few years, training was solely done by personnel at the County Office of Education. This year, we went ahead and sent our data technician, our AP data technician, to a specific training in Southern California for ARIES and for CalPads. So that way we could garner some more internal knowledge and assist with that process.
You have a very different process here where your county is much more involved. So it's different to tell you 58 counties, 58 different ways of doing things. I
Right.
didn't realize that before this job.
And sorry, this is Trustee Ross. Who's accountable for the schools and then for the admin? Who's accountable to make sure that that information is correct?
Typically the process should be that at the school site, that obviously we're following the appropriate procedures and the laws related to attendance. Monthly, those attendance logs should be given to the principals. The principals review them for any large red flags or any concerns, maybe spot audit, and then those are signed and they should be filed at the district, at their site. We do pool those for audit, and so a lot of times we'll have to send those signature forms in for audit. We're asking now that those be forwarded a copy to the district office here so that we can just kind of verify them monthly. And then when we go through the process, as she had mentioned, of entering those into the CalPad system, what we have done in the past and what it was just really hard to give them a good solid track on is, obviously we're not going to know. You know, we can't go back and go, was the kid still there? You know, we don't have that kind of tracking system, but taking that information when it's compiled and then forwarding it to the sites and saying, does this look right with your records, is really what we've done in the past. It was just really hard because there wasn't a set procedure necessarily for that. And so we weren't able to give FCMAT specific, here's your backup for it. So that was the difficult part, but that's what we're doing now. And even in our last reporting period, that was forwarded out to the sites. We then make that the SOA or the school office assistant and the principal's responsibility to review those, make sure they look sound before they're submitted.
And they sign off.
Yeah.
And you keep saying we, and by we, you mean?
I'm sorry. So we have the accounts payable and our data technician. And the data technician takes a lot of that responsibility for verifying that, collecting it, and then the submittal to CalPads. It's also reviewed by the accountant, and then ultimately it's certified by myself once it's all input.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're good. Thank you. Okay, in the area of internal controls and fraud prevention, this is the area that you receive the most no's. And I would expect a lot of no's in this area because you're a small school district, but that still doesn't make it okay. So this is the one that makes my stomach hurt. And because I'm an internal control freak, I just am. And I truly believe that even though a district is small, you can still find enough people to make internal controls work. So that's just my preach of the day in this. And I believe that Ms. Leslie will make that happen, right? And so, and you have enough people in your district to make this work, all of these things work. So I believe that after this FHRA, it will end up working. One of them, the payroll, the segregation of duties was already in place, already being talked about when we came in. So, I know some of this had already been talked about. Cash in a lot of districts, the cash coming in, not being double counted that last time, and then not a tamper-proof bag, that is not uncommon. So that one doesn't surprise. There's things here that don't surprise me. So again, if that was 1 or 2 or 3 of the no's, wouldn't have been a big deal. This is just a mountain that just keeps climbing. So I would just say all of these are important, right? Just a lot of these on top of each other. And then leadership and stability, right? It all starts at the top. Now, so, if Heather had been here longer, this wouldn't be a no, right? So that's why that one got to be a no. We need to do more training, absolutely, with your leaders when it comes to budget and all of that. And, with the board, if you aren't getting training as often as you should, those are easy fixes. So some of these are easy fixes when it comes to that. It sounds like you're going through a superintendent change. That would be a no now too, right? So there's a lot of things that can change all of the time, right? So leadership, it does really start at the top. And so I think that this is another area that, especially with training, that can be shored up. And so that is the last slide that I have here.
Oh, they're switching over. Sorry, this is Trustee Ross. Do we have anything in the making do we have any plans for training coming up?
This is President Holt. Yes, still waiting to hear back with the details from Superintendent Gail Gabrielina Mojica. But she is putting together budget training for the entire board
Beautiful.
and
Thank
the
you.
other boards within Potter County.
Beautiful.
This is Superintendent Designee Michelle Garcia. There's also CSBA coming up. And I believe that Kirsten sent out the information to the trustees with all of the training opportunities as well.
CBO Leslie again. And then also part and parcel with this, I don't want it to get missed that it's not just budget training, but also governance training. And I think you guys are having a governance workshop coming up as well. And we continue to look for, as we have in the past, make available trainings for governance for the board, especially with new members.
And then in addition, in that section, it is training for site and department, anyone handling budget, right? So make sure that gets thrown in there as well. Okay, so in conclusion, the risk score reflected in the report is high, right? We can't get around that. And it is what we found at the time of field work. So you guys were 48.4. We think that probably would look different today. But really it's, it is something to be taken seriously, but more than anything else, this fiscal health risk analysis is meant to be a roadmap for you, right? And so it's a roadmap in your efforts of continual improvement. So districts that we've seen do well are ones that take this report, they kind of really study it, they prioritize, they make a plan, they decide who's going to be responsible, put a timeline in place, and then implement that plan, right? You can't do it all overnight, but you can make a plan to try and change each one of those no's to a yes, without falling backwards in another area. But since the tool is free of charge and it's really easy to use, it's basically an Excel spreadsheet, and you download it off of our website. We would just suggest that the district kind of in 6 to 12 months, give yourself time to implement some things. Then we'd love for you to go back and do a self-evaluation yourself, right? Because you don't have to do the entire tool. You can actually do certain sections and see if you've improved in that, and just gauge where your progress is in terms of your risk score, because you really want that risk score just incrementally, tamping down. And we would just encourage you to work closely with your county office. School business is an ever-changing environment, just like everything else in education. And there is no way for one person to know everything in terms of school business. So work closely with your county office, who can be an invaluable resource. Seek out any possibility, get on our listservs, attend training where you can, go to those school services workshops on budget and things like that. Get on our listserv for our LCFF calculator, make sure you're using the most up-to-date portion of that. Really, there's a wealth of information out there. So just kind of prepare yourself the best you can to have the most recent and relevant information you can. So that kind of concludes our presentation. And I know we asked a few questions along the way, but I'll take any others that you have at this time.
Yeah, Vice President Wedge, I have a question on slide 18 of the internal controls and fraud prevention.
Okay.
It was mentioned that this was the highest nose out of everything. Now, what rings out to me is the fraud. Do you guys actually just note that there's fraud prevention? There's a lot of no's, or did you guys point out where there could have been some fraud potentially?
Yeah, so let me just totally address that, please. So internal control totally talks about things like authorizations, verifications, approvals, reconciliations, that segregation of duties, which is harder to do in smaller districts. So in no way, shape, or form are we saying that there's fraud. Okay, so let me make that very clear.
Okay.
But you want to have those internal controls in place to avoid any chance of fraud. So not only is it to safeguard the district's assets, but to safeguard your employees as well. If you have one person that's handling something from beginning to end, an accusation can be made and careers have been ruined that way. So you would never want that to happen to one of your employees. So no, we did not see anything that gave us pause.
Thank you.
Yes, we would have.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Are there any other questions?
Well, this is the first, I think I'd heard of the $50,000 that was returned in the after-school grant money. We've talked about some Title III funds. It was about $5,000, but I just, I'm not sure how I missed that, but that was significant. And especially given the need for, I mean, it seems like all of our families are clamoring for after-school care.
We don't go that deep in the tools. So
Okay.
just to let you know, so we don't have the answer for that.
Okay.
So the district did it have anything to do with COVID? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely a portion of it.
okay.
CBO Leslie again. So a lot of this stuff we can dive into as we work on Superintendent Designee Lucia Garcia and I have already discussed how I'm looking to put an implementation plan in place as they kind of already noted, and work with both audit findings, county office letters, and this report as a tool to go forward with that. So some of that will be delved into, but the biggest thing with after school program is really the ACES grant, which is a completely different subset than any of the other grants that we've had. And it's a little bit confusing to me, I'm going to be honest, because it is kind of a confusing program. So it's the one that we partner with the Boys and Girls Club for. So they have to apply, and we apply in conjunction with them for this ACES grant. Then we're given an amount of money and they have to submit expenditure reports quarterly. So essentially they submit the expense report, we pay them out of that grant money. They just didn't expend that money. So we didn't give it to them. And so it just kind of sat in the account, and then we had to turn it over at the end. So of course it would be optimal, just like with many of our other title programs, to utilize that funding fully if we could. However, sometimes the restrictions that are put on some of those monies and the programs and the ways that we're able to offer them, it just lends it to the fact that we may have some one-offs in some of the accounts. And then also with this program, with some of the COVID restrictions, with some of the closures, with the inability for them to find staff at the same time that we were having a hard time finding staff, those expenditures just didn't happen for them.
But this is trustee Brickler.
Did that go to like a monitoring piece of like, how do we continuously ensure that any of those, and we had so many one-time dollars, but that they are, I know I've seen a spreadsheet tracking when they all become, when they're their deadlines to expend, but could that have been avoided had someone been watching the expenditures more closely?
I mean, I think CBO Leslie here again, I think, yes. I mean, we have some monitoring that we're in place, and we have to do regular reporting on title funds, which is actually our biggest area where we get concerned on it. As you can see, the spreadsheet that we've provided numerous times for the ESSER fund kind of shows the tracking, how we're using those. The ACES funding, however, I can't really tell them how to spend their money. I just have to pay them out based on what their expenditures are. So that's one of those programs that runs quite a bit differently. It just became very difficult for them to expend that money. I feel like so far, looking at their expenditure reports that have been sent for this year, that they're doing much better in expending that money.
I think the larger point is, and you actually already said this, but is how do we utilize this information and how do we use it as an accountability tool? So that was covered, but that was my main concern after reading this, is that you're hearing a number of things that that were at high risk, and all of the specific. I appreciate the report, the detail, the structure that you've provided to us. So I guess how would we as a board, when do we want to be updated on? We were talking about doing like a self-assessment or having the district do a self-assessment tool. I just think it's really important that we try to utilize the tool as a tracking and accountability tool to make sure that these controls are in place.
This is President Holt. Thank you, Clerk Brickler. It's like you're reading from my notes for some at the end there.
I did.
While you're up here still thank you again for this report. I don't have any other questions. I had a couple. I wanted you to come back out next year, but you answered that. We just self-assess. So we'll just plan on doing that and implementing those controls. So I think at this time, are there any additional questions for our presenters from PICMAT tonight?
Presenters, no, I just have one quick question for you.
Well, then let's do that in a second. I want to let them then have a
Perfect.
seat if so. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
For your presentation.
Thank you.
And then, yeah, so for the superintendent designee and for Heather, really for superintendent designee here, I know I'd really like to see kind of a report plan response to this, sort of a response addressing these, what action is being taken, where we're at, that sort of thing. And then your recommendations for self-assessment. I think at least, maybe 6 months out for a self-assessment. I don't know what the rest of the board's thinking on that.
I think that's good.
First interim.
Well, actually, I wrote down February, March, just kind of spitballing, but
I think also getting a basis of, well, this is how far we've come even since they did theirs,
Right.
and getting this is what we need to keep on doing would be a really good visual.
this President Holt again is thinking just maybe sometime in August, if we can have that report due, since, we don't have a board meeting in July. People are gonna be doing whatever they're gonna be doing. But I think August would give us time to have that complete. And sorry, Clerk Brickler, yeah, you would.
Oh, no, it was the idea that maybe we should ask CBO Leslie how she would like to, or what she thinks would be the most effective way. We don't want to add another. I think it's a really important tool, but see if she has any suggestions about how to keep us updated on what's being put in place as a result of this risk assessment.
Thank you. CBO Leslie again. So this is the folder that's already been started. So, so that's why everything that got tucked into that, making notes on the inside cover. So my summer vacation is kind of planned out here to work on that already. And if I'm actually comfortable presenting the report with some of the information, like you said, August, I think maybe when we come back might be a good time to take a first blush at it. And then I'm happy to bring it back at first interim. We can kind of marry those things together. And I made a note to do a self-assessment again in 6 months. And I think that'll hit, a little bit maybe after that time, or as we get a little bit closer to going into spring. Perhaps it would be a really good time. It may actually hit right about that time, August, September, October, November, December, January. Yeah, it's going to hit right about that same time. So we'll do another self-assessment just to see where we are from, like you'd said, from that first interim where they actually had to take this information. It was kind of like a snapshot of first interim time and how that looks. And that'll give us a basis just from what has gone from first interim till now, and then revisit again in a following 6 months, I think would be a really good place for us to start, if that's amenable to the board.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and are there any additional questions along those lines in the board? Okay, moving forward then to item 8, public comment.
We do have 2 public comments. Monica Peak.
Good evening. My name is Monica Peak and I'm the TK teacher from Rock Creek School. I've been being involuntarily and very unhappily moved to Auburn Elementary as our beloved Rock Creek has been closed. And I was told that I would be placed in one of the portable classrooms across the parking lot and off of the school campus because there are not enough classrooms for all 139 students. I went to look at the portables and they were appalling inside and out. There was rot, water damage, holes in the floors, sagging ceiling tiles. These portables are expired and look condemned. They were purchased from the PCOE for $1 by Stan Brandel, the previous facilities director, to be used as storage, which is what they are currently being used for still. The district has never used them as classrooms, but the PCOE had a preschool classroom there and they had to leave 19 years ago because the fire marshal deemed them not up to code. I don't think they've been worked on at all since. These portables have no fire sprinklers, no exit signs, no internet, no school intercom speakers, no telephone or intercom to call the office, and are not ADA compliant. The AC and lights were never upgraded. The playground by the portables is completely unsafe. Aside from the crumbling and unsafe buildings, when I walked along the side of the parking lot, through the gate, across the blacktop, up the ramp, and around the buildings to get to the cafeteria, I timed it at 6 minutes. This was in pleasant conditions too. I can only imagine how much longer it'll take with 24-year-olds in the rain, snow, or 100-degree heat. Having to walk there twice daily for snack and lunch will take 24 minutes of instruction time away. And as I mentioned, these portables are at the campus and across the entire long parking lot with no path around it. I cannot walk my littlest students through the unsafe parking lot, and to go any other way would take us up the street sidewalk and completely away from everyone. And what do I do when a little student has a potty accident or a bloody nose or throws up or gets injured? I can't just send them to the office with another student. What happens when my para cannot come to school and cannot find a sub? These things happen regularly in TK. There are so many safety concerns that I can't even name them all in my 3 minutes. Our number one rule at school is to be safe. If you place any students in those horrible portables so far from the rest of the school, you're breaking our most important rule. I will not allow any students to be placed in those unsafe conditions. And we'll go to whatever length to protect our. I place each child at the heart of every decision. Thank you.
Sarah Liebert.
Good evening, President Holt, trustees, and Superintendent Lucci Garcia. The decision to close Rock Creek was made by this board. Auburn Elementary was supposed to be the safer school and the one with more space for students. The campus is bursting at the seams with so many so that the portables by the parking lot will probably be used next year. The date of the manufacturer is 1989. The span of a portable classroom is usually 20 to 25 years, and that's with aggressive maintenance. This seems like a decision where no one wins. If we put students in these portables, they will not be in a gated school area and safe. What about the fact that there are no fire alarms or intercoms to be connected in those classrooms? The heating and air systems have never been updated, nor have the lights been updated. In addition, the ramps and the doors are in terrible condition. The inside of the classrooms have stains, carpets on the walls, and are very dark. There are 2 to 3 outlets for technology or other uses, but there's no wire for internet services. I highly encourage you as a board to walk the Auburn Elementary campus for yourselves and see the classrooms and what conditions they are. One of the classrooms has a ton of chemicals for maintenance as they use for projects and cleanups. What are the repercussions of having those toxic chemicals in a closed space? Do they go into the walls? Do they stay around? If the buck stops with you, what will be done to ensure the health and safety of the students of AUSD? Respectfully, Sarah Liebert.
I understand that we can't respond directly to our public commenters, but I think as a board, we can ask administration to follow up on the concerns that have been brought forth and see if as a board, we can have the opportunity to visit these spaces so that we can see
Progress.
see what the conditions are and also have an understanding of what the plan is for where students will be placed with the consolidations.
So how would you like that to be followed up? Would you like it in an email or at the next board meeting? What does that look like for you as a board?
This is President Holt. It seems that we would get a response sooner if we can get that by email, rather than at the next regularly scheduled board meeting. But I think we could probably also get at one of these special board meetings this month too. Maybe the one in 2 weeks. Now, and also
Thank you.
Superintendent designate. Now, have some of these already been addressed in these concerns? Are you working on it? Is there a plan?
Yeah, so the plan is that, major work happens when students are home. And so CBO Leslie can probably speak a little bit to the maintenance that's scheduled to happen there, but there is maintenance scheduled to repair some of the things like I think the ramp started this week or is starting soon, that type of thing. So we are aware of the need for maintenance, and there is a plan for getting the maintenance done. And then as far as the internet goes, Dave is already working and meeting with companies to provide cabling out there. So we did think about these things in advance in case we needed to use those portables.
This is Trustee Ross. And I'm curious because something goes wrong in our kitchen, we have health services that oversees that. If something goes wrong in our classrooms or our portables, who oversees that? Is that OSHA? Is that the fire marshal? Who's overseeing that the portables are in a quality space?
Thank you, CBO Leslie again. So there are a couple of factors. So we generally have regular fire inspections that happen at all sites, all campuses. Those are typically once annually. We also have, coupled with that, fire extinguisher inspections, things of that nature. The fire marshal discussion that came up, I actually have been in contact with the fire marshal inspector for CAL FIRE for Placer County, since those are not within the city limits. They don't have any record of any condemnation, nor do they condemn buildings. I don't know if they had been used for classrooms before or not. They were purchased at that time, but they have no record of any concerns of that nature. The building department would not also condemn a school site necessarily. Our permits go through the state architect's office. So it would have to be something where an engineer would declare that they would be an unsafe building. They have been visited by numerous architects as we've gone through the master planning process, and then also as we've looked at other sites. Thus far, I have a call out to one of our district architects to double check with Division of State Architect to make sure there's no reports. They don't see any on file, but they're going to go ahead and request an extra set of plans to make sure there's no other notes that are on there. However, they don't see any issues, but I am working out with them if they have any concerns that they have an engineer that visits just to make sure. At this time, however, like she said, we had already planned for some major repairs to those anyways, but things such as dry rot on the exterior or things like that would not necessarily preclude somebody from utilizing that as a classroom anyways. Those would just be things that you often see on many portables. And I know that there was the discussion about how they expire, but portables don't actually expire. So as much as we'd like to say they're temporary facilities, the qualification of 20 to 25 years is actually in order to qualify it for modernization funding through the Office of Public School Construction. However, regular upkeep of them typically is what you would see in most school portables. For example, the portables that were placed at Auburn Elementary or even at some of our other sites or at Sky Ridge happened over 20 years ago, closer to 30 years ago, and those portables are still going strong and don't seem to be of issue.
Is there this is Trustee Ross, is there any way to make sure that we have an architect come in for reassurance before we send our students in there? I know it makes no sense almost to bring them in now, but once things are fixed up and up to par, is there any way so that we can reassure our families and our teachers that it's a safe place to be in?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's, as I said, what I'm working on scheduling right now, but they want to pull the plans and get them from Division of State Architect.
Division
and any
of
other
State Architect?
Yes, Division of the State Architect. That's our governing body when it comes to our school sites.
And anybody can pull these documents?
I would think so. I mean, they were approved plans when they were placed. So
okay,
you absolutely can.
All right, Vice President Wedge. I think it also would be good to maybe before the school opens to have a site visit from the fire marshal. And because one of the concerns I have, if those were vacant buildings and we're doing simple modifications, I understand when you do larger projects, go through a different process, but life safety is a big issue. And if we're doing modifications to life safety, I would like to make sure, the notification is working properly and, all the bells and whistles and it's being relay to the local authorities, as well.
Thank you, CBO Leslie again. So many notification systems, just so we're clear, when it comes to fire protection, many schools don't have them that alarm direct. We do have some that alarm direct, but some are just what they call auditory. So you would get alarms that just kind of blare to the outside. That's pretty typical in a lot of schools throughout California. As far as the fire marshal visit, an inspection, I think we can absolutely do that. We're not making any modifications to that system. So when we talk about sprinklers are not necessarily required in all the spaces. You're kind of grandfathered. If we were to modernize a building, as we've talked about, adding to sites or modernizing or pushing out walls, that's when it would trigger that installation of sprinklers throughout older buildings. So I think we can absolutely have them come out. He seemed really workable and, easygoing with that. So I don't think they would have a problem coming out to do that as well.
Trustee Ross, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Trustee Ross here. Another question is, I realized that at Rock Creek and Evie Kane, we had people coming over to check our HVAC systems. And they said that they would not be going to Auburn Elementary until the following year, per their state guidelines. Do we have anybody that's coming in? Because I know those were not switched by the HVAC. Is anybody coming over to check the HVAC system?
Thank you, CBO Leslie here. So the heating and air conditioning systems are actually fully functional in those. They have not been, they weren't replaced recently with the COVID funds. So we do have newer systems in a lot of our buildings, but the portables at all sites were not necessarily replaced. So that's just something of those building systems are ones they're standalones. So I think that I can refer to Justin Carrion, our manager of maintenance and operations, to see if we have a timeline for any future replacements, but that would rely on our deferred maintenance funds again.
That would be great. I know that's a huge concern. If I could make a request for that, I would love to.
And again, I'll look at it, but we would prioritize those based on age of facilities and length of time and last maintenances. So I don't want to say automatically that means that we would go out and replace all new systems on those 3 portables. There's a very good chance we have other portables within the district that may have a greater need or be older than those.
The 1989?
It's entirely possible. And that's not to say that they haven't been done since 1989. That was just the manufacture date on those portables.
This is President Holt. In order to kind of keep us on track here, just want to ask that we get that report. It seems like the board is good in 2 weeks. We kind of get that response from the staff here, what's being done. I think we can investigate and ask some more questions at that time. But for now, I'd like to kind of keep trucking along. So moving to item 9, association comments. Ms. Sarah Liebert again.
Good evening, President Holt, trustees, and Superintendent Lucci Garcia. We have officially reached the end of the school year. Yay! But many of us are busy packing, reviewing files, purging, and trying to pack up our classrooms for a move in a few weeks. Did you know that there have been more than 15 teachers that have left our district this year? And they can easily go up the hill or down the hill, get more money, get more preparation time, and have more consistent accountability and communication. My question to you is, has there been any interview exits asking these teachers why they're leaving? You might be surprised that it isn't always about the money. That is not why we go into teaching. It's for the love of the job, teaching our children, and making a difference in their lives. Respectfully, Sarah Liebert, AUTA President.
Thank you. I don't see CSCA here. Oh,
I'm not.
okay. I didn't think so, but you started to move. So moving to item 10 and comments from the superintendent.
So I'm going to bring us back to some exciting things that are happening with instruction. So we had are having some backward planning going on with teachers and their grade levels. And the goal behind this backward planning was to bring the new teachers that are coming in alongside their grade level partners and really start looking at what they're going to be doing for next school year. We also had the assessment team reconvene and take a look at the standards-based report cards and the assessments that we are putting in front of our students to make sure that they, had some time to review and revise as needed. So that's been some exciting. That's been exciting this week. So that's just this week alone. Not to mention, I just really want to thank all of our staff, and I'm going to kind of focus on our maintenance operations right now because of all of these setup and tear down for all of the different exciting end of year activities that we had last week. So lots of exciting things going on as well.
This is President Holt. Unfortunately, I missed all those fun, exciting things last week. I was sick the entire week. But just generally, I'm really grateful for the opportunity we have here as a board and as a district, getting this assistance from FICMAT, getting people kind of digging in here and getting that light shined on the district so we can go through and make sure that we are setting ourselves up on a good financial track here and good track as a district. So I'm grateful for that opportunity that we've got right now. And are there comments from the rest of the board?
Yes, Vice President Wedge. I was able to attend 2 events last week. The bridge ceremony at Alta Vista and at Evie Kane, the graduation. And first off, the weather was amazing last week. And I was just overwhelmed just to see so many families out there and supporting their schools and their community. So it was really good to see and be a part of that. So.
I have a few comments, and some of them, sorry, this is Sarah Brickler, and some of them are related to new requests, but since we last met, the State Board of Education met and regarding the funding determination for Alta Vista. And I understand that the board had made a decision to close the charter outright, but since then we've learned that we are funded for a homeschool through the charter. And so I've asked the question of administration whether it's too late to somehow repurpose the charter as a homeschool program, just recognizing that there are many families who are choosing this option, want more flexibility. Some of those families will be attending classes at Blue Door, and that this is an important revenue stream for our district at a time when we desperately need revenue streams. Another thing that's been on my mind, I can't tell if this is working or not, is how we preserve the history of Alta Vista and Rock Creek, that staff are working so hard to go through, just decades of belongings and curriculum and artifacts. And I reached out to a city council member to see if possibly we could have some of these, like there's a picture from Alta Vista of the class of 1911. And I don't want these things to get tossed or to somehow, get lost in the shuffle. And I don't know how we can be really intentional about preserving that history and perhaps having, at City Hall, for example, they have art displays regularly. And if there's a way to somehow share it with the community. I'm curious about how we can alleviate pressure at Auburn Elementary, just hearing about how incredibly full that school will be. I know on paper the capacity is 624 plus, but I'm just wondering how we're planning to utilize the Rock Creek site. I know that they're going to have some preschool programs operating there, and I don't know if there's a way to somehow shift some of the programming. I mean, just one wild idea would be to have like an early childhood, like have kindergarten and TK and preschools at Rock Creek. I don't know what's feasible, and it's so late in the year, but I'm really concerned about the potential for overcrowding at Auburn Elementary. And one positive thing I wanted to mention is I was walking into Staples the other day and the manager caught me and she said, "We have more school supplies for you. Let's load them up in your car right now." So I just wanted to acknowledge that they donated an additional 200 boxes and they're in the warehouse, and just that I'm really grateful for all the community partners who keep showing up for our students.
This is trustee Ross. And without getting emotional, it's really hard to see these schools close. It is really, really difficult. Not only when you have attended these schools, but you put your heart and life and soul into these classrooms. And I just want to take a moment to realize that this is not an easy process for teachers. I've been at classrooms, they don't even know how to put the boxes together. Some don't even have enough tape, and all they're doing is crying through the whole entire process. There is a lot to go through, and I wish that every member on this board could go to one classroom at least and help a teacher and see what this process looks like. It is so difficult. I've been putting boxes together, moving boxes, helping teacher after teacher, and I only say that because I feel your pain, and I want you to know that we're here. And if you can do this, then we can do this with you. This is hard for me to say, but I really look forward to collaborating with Auburn Elementary and Rock Creek. I look forward to rebranding that school. I look forward to our children getting along and having a wonderful, wonderful year. I'm very grateful for Principal Vincetti and what she's done for Auburn Elementary. And I'm super, super appreciative and grateful that Miss Morris will be joining us next year to help put this together in a manner that's suitable for everybody. But I just really want you to know, teachers and staff, that my heart is with you. This is not an easy process. And if there's anything I can personally do, I am totally available, and do not hesitate to reach out.
All right, thank you. And actually, I think it's about a good time for us to take a 5-minute recess in case anyone else needs to use the restroom. So I see 7:51. So we could return back at let's round up 7:57. We'll resume here. Holt. We are coming back into session. Returning from that brief recess. And up next is item 11, the consent agenda. And is there anything to be pulled on that?
I was hoping to pull this is Sarah Brickler, item C and item I.
Okay. All right, and is there a motion on the rest of the agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda with the removal of C and I.
And this is President Holt. I'll second the motion. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed? All right, the motion carries. All right, so
Item C is the personnel report.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to acknowledge there's a lot of, I mean, at this time of year, sometimes there's a lot of change in our personnel. There was a retirement that we didn't have the chance to acknowledge from our last meeting. So Susan Spence is retiring. And we just wanted to, I don't know, I just thought it was important to acknowledge the many years of service. And there's an incredible amount of staff turnover, particularly teachers. We're losing both Amy Cooks. We had two Amy Cooks and they're both putting in their resignation as of this report. And just wanted to take a moment to thank all of those teachers who, and it's not just teachers, but there's in this report, there's a particular amount of turnover among the teaching staff that I think it's important to acknowledge.
and this is President Holt. I move to approve the personnel report.
I second that.
And all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And seeing none, that motion carries. And Clerk Brickler, item I.
Item I is the itinerant vice principal. And I was hoping to get more information about this proposal because it seems like my understanding is that this would be taking the current vice principal position at E.V. Kane and just changing the job description so that that individual could float to any of the three campuses to support those schools. And I know we are limited in terms of our resources, but it seems like it's very important to have that level of support at our middle school. And I mean, I do see that that Auburn Elementary will have a similar number of students to E.V. Kane in this upcoming school year. And it only makes sense to have the additional vice principal support at those sites. But I was just hoping to get more background on how this came to be, why it's being recommended, because it seems like we need, if anything, we need an additional vice principal, not to take the resources we have and make them more and just spread them among three campuses.
Sure. So this position becoming itinerant will serve all three schools as needed. So if you look at enrollment, our Auburn Elementary enrollment is higher than E.V. Kane's currently. Now we also recognize that there's a need for middle school students to have the extra additional support. And so what we didn't want to do was take away from the need at the middle school by saying, well, it's just based on numbers, right? Because the need is not just based on numbers, it's based on what the need is. And so if you look at middle school, we definitely recognize that need, but there's also going to be a need, especially in this transition year, to just have the option to provide that extra service to our school, our elementary schools. If it becomes that, if we recognize that we did not need this through data and conversations with our administrative staff, then we can revisit that later on. But just because we're approaching a year of new and of transition. And I've heard a lot of comments about a need for extra support. We're not in a position to have extra support in terms of hiring another vice principal, but we can definitely look at the data and the need and have this itinerant person support our schools in the best way possible.
Are there other support models such as like perhaps like a teacher on special assignment? Or are there other ways to get the support that's needed to Skyridge and Auburn Elementary?
Well, yeah, and we do have an EL TOSA, teacher on special assignment, right? That
You
is
said
something
EL?
specific to serve our English learner population. And so and I'm gonna explain that briefly because it's not just about teaching our English learners, right? It's that the English learner program has so much compliance or so much law, and it has, I mean, ELD has its own set of framework, you know, its own standards, right? And so it's truly a very deep program. And so in this year of transition, you know, we recognize that another layer of support would be to help the principal with some of the tasks of, let's say, getting information to families regarding ELAC, helping to, you know, get families to DLAC and that sort of thing, provide some extra instructional support to staff to support our English learners, because our goal really is to reclassify English learners within 5 years. And we're on a great path to do that. So what I didn't want is for everyone to be busy with their new norm, and not and lose that support, right? And so this EL TOSA will be able to ensure that the systems and structures are in place at all 3 of our schools to continue to support and reclassify our English learners. But some of that involves compliance, and that compliance piece is the responsibility of the principal. The principal will still be responsible for that, but they will have some help in that area. So now, again, freeing up the principal to do all the things that we don't know yet, right? There are things we don't know that are going to come their way, and we're going to learn that this year. But that EL TOSA is a support. We also continue with the academic intervention that is funded using special funds for the classrooms. So again, another layer of support, not just helping the classroom, but also helping the principal to meet those site goals that the parents and the staff on the school site councils have asked for, right? We're continuing with Title I programs, and we are going to be a district-wide Title district, which means that our Title I dollars go to all of the schools, and there's a specific number of like, I don't know how much it is offhand, but there's a specific dollar amount that's assigned to every student that is unduplicated or underserved. And so where those students go, the money follows them, right? And so with that support, there's the Title I. So when we talk about supports, I'm thinking of the whole picture, right? So how do we support the families? How do we support the administration? And how do we support the staff to all support the students? Because everything we're all doing is for the kids, right? So we added in all those layers of support. So that EL TOSA position, again, compliance and instruction. We still have our instructional coaching program. That's absolutely a layer of support. We have our program specialists monitoring the effectiveness of our programs. But then the itinerant vice principal position will give us the option of providing that layer of support to our schools, which we have not had.
I want to clarify that. So we currently have someone hired as, I mean, we've Patty Leffridge has been serving as our vice principal at EV Kane. So the proposal is that her position, she would remain in that position, but she would be moving to the 3 campuses.
Yes.
And is there one English learner TOSA
There
that would
is.
be shared across the 3 campuses?
District-wide, that's correct.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't remember this, and I don't know if you know it offhand. Trustee Ross, what is the ratio from students to VP? Like, how many students do we need per VP? I remember we did this a year ago, and I
We did.
apologize because I don't remember if you were.
I thought it was 501 at the middle school. 500. Okay, 500 at the middle school level. I don't know if we have that for elementary. I can't remember that.
It's
It
like
wasn't relevant at the
650
time.
or something.
It is
So they
higher.
had a higher threshold for when a VP is recommended.
Yes, and the reason for that is that middle school students typically need a little bit more support from a vice principal than elementary students, right? And so.
And we've hit that. We have 500 students at EV Kane. And so if we have 500 students at that middle school and we can actually get a vice principal there, like now our ratio is complete, don't we need an additional someone to come in and help? Because now we're taking her out of where she needs to be, where the ratios are set for. And now you're adding extra work, or we are adding extra work.
Sure, that would be ideal. However, we don't know for sure that we're going to have that need ongoing, right? So we're looking at this transition year to really provide that level of support as needed to the elementary schools. And then, as everything in education, it's the continuous, improvement model where we look at data, we we make decisions about where we're going next year, right? So if there is a need that we have determined through data this upcoming year to have an additional vice principal, then we would have to figure out how to pay for that, bring that to the board, and then you would have to approve that.
Is that something that could be paid for by those Title I funds?
No, because that would be supplanting. We already have a vice principal. You cannot add another vice principal because that's considered supplanting. And Auburn has had some supplanting issues. The year that I came in, we had an FPM review and there was some supplanting that had happened. And if you talk about, having to return money or reverse the books, that's what happens when you supplant. So we have to be really careful not to supplant. Title funds are very specific.
But, okay. Okay.
And we are currently using supplemental concentration funds to be able to pay for the vice principal position already. And so if our concentration goes down and we lose funds, that could be something that we aren't able to continue as it is. And, so there are many issues that we're faced with and many ways to solve them. We believe that we are taking the proper steps to support our sites the best way we can next year. But like I said, this is why I love that we use Google, because if we used Word, we would have to have 15,000 revisions of everything. Google's live, we monitor, we revise, and then we come back to you with our plans for implementation each year. That's what we do.
And so that is LCAP. Could we use LCAP funds, or is that the same thing?
That is what we're using supplemental concentration dollars within our LCAP plan. That's the plan to fund the vice principal position.
And I guess my question would be is, can we use those funds to supplement somebody, an additional support?
If we determine through the monitoring of the data this upcoming year that that's the direction we want to go. But keep in mind, we only have so much money, and it's per the students that generate the money, right? So if we decrease enrollment and our concentration goes down, which had already happened, and that's what we had to cut back on some of the services that we were providing, like transportation. When that happens, we have to look at that as a whole, and then we go to the community for engagement. We have our LCAP advisory committee as well, and then we have our student groups, and so there's that process. So we would take the data and say, data shows that we need or don't need this. This is the data. You look at it, you give us your input, and then we put that input into the plan. And if you recall, you may or may not recall, it's been a couple of months, but as we had our LCAP advisory team meetings, we linked all of the actions and the recommendations in the week in review for the board to take a look at, kind of where we were going. So we will keep you informed on where we are with that.
Great, thank you. So this is President Holt. So it does sound like too that, it's not like the vice principal position. They aren't going to be having to split their time according to some preordained metric. They're going to do it as necessary, and that'll give us kind of some data information and that feedback to determine whether or not we need an additional position the next year.
That is correct. And it may be that neither elementary site really needs the vice principal much, and that's fine. That is something that we're going to work out with the leadership team. I work with the principals hand in glove. We are constantly communicating and talking about what the needs are. In fact, some of what we're talking about came out of those needs that were conveyed to me through working with the principal from what they hear at their site and concerns from their families. So
thank you. This is President Holt again. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve this item, Vice President Wedge.
All right, President Holt, I'll second the motion to approve itinerant vice principal. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
Right here. Aye, nay, what do you say?
Nay.
Nay, nay.
All right. Correct. Clerk Brickler and Trustee Ross and nays. Okay, moving to item 12, the action items, and 12A, consideration and possible approval of interim superintendent contract. Thank you.
Coming around for you is contract for Southwestern. This is Kim Bogart, council. Coming around is the contract for an interim superintendent, and this is 2 Michelle Garcia. It is a very simplistic document, and we talked about terms and conditions other than financial in closed session. This is just for folks in the audience. This is a June 1, 2023 through June 30, 2024 contract. It is for 220 days of service, and basically will be terminated at any time that 30 days notice by either party. This is a stopgap between where you are now, over designee, and where you will be.
Oh, can you turn your mic on, please?
Do I have to say it all again? This is Kim Bogart. I'm counsel for the district, and this is an abbreviated contract for an interim superintendent contract for Michelle Lucci Garcia. And you've talked about all of the terms in closed session except for financial, which you're required to talk about in open session. So other than if there are any questions about the document, I've made changes that were requested based on non-financial issues from closed session earlier. And at this point, you need a motion for a financial compensation and a vote. I wanted to clarify, you had mentioned that there is there's language that this contract can be terminated with 30 days notice.
Correct.
But can you also clarify that barring there be like some illegal conduct that she has the right to return to her assistant superintendent or other role?
Absolutely. Yeah, and on page 3, it talks about 30 days written notice by either party to terminate the contract. And should either party terminate, Ms. Lucci Garcia has the right to return to her assistant superintendent of educational services position at any time during the term of this contract.
This is Trustee Ross. My question in regards to that, and this may be directed towards Superintendent Lucci Garcia. If I heard the possibility of maybe letting go of the position of assistant superintendent, if that is an option, would you go back to that position? Would we remake that position, or would you go back to something similar or comparable to?
I'm not sure how to answer that question. I have to give that. So you're saying if we were to terminate the assistant superintendent position, then where would I go?
Yes.
Without a job? Oh, well, thank you. Well, I wouldn't want to leave the district. So I'm not sure how to answer that question without some thought, to be honest.
Sure.
President Holt, I think to follow up with Trustee Ross, I think she's concerned that if you were to reorganize and remove that position, that we might not have you. I think that's what Trustee Ross is concerned about.
Thank you.
So I think that's what her concerns are.
Right.
And so if that helps clarify.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't want to leave. So what would I do?
You know,
I wouldn't go to Starbucks and apply. Yeah.
I feel like I think she answered the question more or less. I think she would be.
I would
fine
do
to stay within the
something. I
district.
would mop. I don't know. I would do something.
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions about the contract? Has everybody had a chance to review for any of the edits that we asked to be made earlier?
President Holt, do you want to kind of tackle the topic of timing, that this is the sort of action that needs to occur within a regular board meeting, or perhaps our council could describe? One of my concerns is that we're having to do this very expeditiously because
Sure.
as of May 31st, we no longer have a superintendent. And so we have this kind of gap of on paper of leadership.
Right.
And so we're needing to, and we have to take action in a regular board meeting, which we won't have. We have tonight, and then we have the next one scheduled is August. So
Clerk Brickler, that's
Yeah.
exactly, I think you said it all.
Okay.
And so we want to make sure that we have an official interim superintendent who is actually charged with leading the district. And we don't want to leave that as a gap for another 2 months. So
and despite all the excessive number of meetings this month, we this is the only regular meeting, and it is the meeting in which we would have to take action. In theory, I would prefer that we had more time for the document to be posted online, for that to be a more transparent. I mean, for the community to have had the chance to review the document that we're discussing now.
and this is President Holt again, and I absolutely hear you there, Clerk Brickler. And if next week's was a regular scheduled board meeting, I think we could have, done this then. But we did, I think, made a number of edits and changes to the contract, and so it would have kind of been in flux. And so I'm sure we'll have this where the public can view it in short order. Now, are there any additional questions on the contract? If none, then I move to appoint Michelle Lucci Garcia as interim superintendent at a rate of $174,000. That's my motion.
I'll go ahead and second that motion.
And all those in favor?
We can do clarifying questions, right? Can you just explain why you would propose $174,000?
This is President Holt. So proposing $174,000. That's the current rate that the superintendent, Michelle Lucci Garcia, is being paid at. And that goes back to the initial contract with the previous superintendent.
Step one.
Step one of the initial contract. And so that's what we were looking at. To do that.
No, thank you. I just so it doesn't that
A random.
to explain that it's not an
absolutely.
arbitrary number,
And
that it's
also-
tied back to the most recent or a prior contract.
Correct. Thank you. And
And maintaining the current level of pay that superintendent or former superintendent designee Michelle Lucci Garcia has been receiving since stepping into that role. Right.
We've made the motion, but we haven't voted yet. So
Okay,
still
that's
not
fine.
formal.
I just want to be clear about this is our opportunity in open session to discuss the financial
So
component.
this is President Holt again, and that also that number also falls fairly squarely in the middle of the averages described by staff for other similar positions in the state and with similar districts. Are there any additional clarifying questions?
No.
All right. Okay, so there is a motion on the table to appoint Michelle Lucci Garcia, interim superintendent, at a rate of $174,000. And we have a second. All in, we already did. Thank you. And all in favor? Aye.
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 And those opposed? Okay,
Welcome. Thank
seeing
you.
none.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
having-
trusting in me. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. So we can sign that later. Thank you. Thank you for getting that turned around.
Thank you.
Okay. And moving on to item 12B, resolution 22-23-25, designation of a representative and alternate to the School Insurance Group Joint Powers Board.
There is a need to revise the primary contract and representation on the school's insurance group joint powers board. CBO Leslie will be the primary representative, and Interim Superintendent Michelle Lucia Garcia will be the alternate. Administration recommends approval.
My only clarifying question is, do we need to update? I was trying to pull it up again. The verbiage because you have a different title than when we developed the form. No? Okay.
I wasn't sure either.
And just a reminder for everybody to please, this President Holt, just a reminder, please state your name
Oh.
when we start again.
Sorry.
All right. Are there any additional clarifying questions? All right. Seeing none, is there a motion?
I will go ahead and make a motion to approve resolution 22-23-25.
I second that.
Please remember to state your name.
Trustee Dowd, I second that.
Trustee Brickler, and this is a resolution, so I'll do a roll call vote. I'll start down the line with President Holt,
Aye.
Vice President Wedge,
Aye.
Trustee Dowd. Aye. Clerk Brickler, aye. Trustee Ross.
Okay, moving to the resolution carries, passes. This is President Holt. Moving to item C, resolution 22-23-26, general liability coverage and workers' compensation for volunteer personnel.
This is Michelle Lucia Garcia, Schools Insurance Group, Workers' Compensation Memorandum of Coverage extends to volunteers who are injured in the course of helping our members. California Labor Code requires the individual district to adopt a resolution of the governing board to include volunteers being covered under workers' compensation in the event of an injury. Administration recommends approval.
My only clarifying question was about how we would document this as someone who's a frequent volunteer, because it says something that the language states the type of approved volunteer service shall be on file in the appropriate district or local school site office prior to commencing volunteer services. So let's say that one day I'm helping pack up a classroom, and one day I'm setting up the stage for a VAPA event, or like there's all these different things. I guess I'm wondering, what is our standard? What must we do to ensure that we are documenting properly that this was, prior to the volunteer services occurring?
Thank you, CBO Leslie. Typically, when people come in to volunteer, they usually have a designation of site or some idea of what they're going to be assisting with. Typically, we rely on our administrative regulations and our board policies to kind of guide that as well. So when you're coming in to volunteer, there's usually a request form. That's one form of documentation. And then we have a whole form.
I'm thinking about more of like the sign-in sheets almost when you come into a school office and you have
Those
to
can be
say,
used as well. Yes.
I'm here at this time and this is who I'm here to see. Maybe that could, I don't know. It was just a loose thought that it seems like we only have this protection if it's documented in a specific manner.
The request from the legal counsel from Schools Insurance Group is that this language, along with the board policies and administrative regulations, and any other forms and processes that we have for volunteers, would be significant enough.
Okay.
This is Trustee Ross. I forgot my name. This only takes place during school hours, or is this like after school when people are playing on the campus, volunteering to clean up or something, or is it just during school?
This should really be, CBO Leslie, this should really be sanctioned volunteer time. We are obviously liable no matter what when we have somebody that decides to come unauthorized onto our campus to a certain degree, but this covers us under the workers' compensation piece instead of just the liability insurance piece.
Thank you.
All right, I have one question, Vice President Wedge. Does this increase our policy amount?
Thank you, CBO Leslie. It does not increase our policy amount. Essentially, we already had, which was great, because there are some districts, from what I'm understanding, in discussions with Schools Insurance Group that did not have board policies and administrative regulations in place already. And it just so happens that ours mirrors what they had sent us in recommendations. So we don't have to adopt those, which is great. This is just the solidifying piece. And this actually assists us in our risk, because it will not open the districts up for civil litigation.
Sorry, last question. Trustee
back.
Ross. Does this affect PTCs in any way? Because I know PTC members volunteer an awful lot. Like, will this affect them in any way? Does it change anything?
CBO Leslie, it should not change that. If they're volunteering on campus, they should still be following the same processes. They should have, a volunteer form. They'll be fingerprinted through the district, and they'll be checking into the office when they're on campus and receiving a visitor badge. So.
And then one-time volunteers, because I know that's kind of a different thing. They're still qualified under this. They still work because they're checking into the office or whatever works. Okay.
Yes, and again, anybody who's volunteering on school district property should be vetted through the Human Resources Department.
And this is President Holt, and looking at the language that's italicized there, it was that Ed Code 3364.5. It talks about volunteer as an unsalaried person authorized by the governing board of a school district or the county and superintendent of schools. So if you're, if you are volunteering correctly, you are an authorized volunteer. But if you're doing like volunteer window washing at the top of the gym, that's probably not authorized and not covered the same way.
And I'm just going to, Michelle Garcia here. I'm just going to add that we have worked really hard to tighten up that volunteer process and pushing everything here to the district office to manage.
I do think there's, sorry, Trustee Brickler, I do think there's an important distinction. I'm well aware of the volunteer packet and the procedures, and we've all, any of us who are volunteering have been cleared for a background check. But there is that distinction that Trustee Ross mentioned of sometimes individuals are allowed, maybe they're not considered a volunteer, but they're able to attend a one-time event on a campus. Correct? Well, there's a difference between the ongoing volunteers who've been vetted.
Correct. Families can absolutely attend events on campus, right? And but volunteers always go through the district office. At least they do now. That's our system, and we have worked really hard with the school offices to implement that.
You said just to clarify, this is Trustee Ross, because people have been asking about volunteering. You said it's all just go straight to the district office. And is that cleared for all schools, or you're only cleared for that single school you come in for?
So I would have to get back to you on some of the details. What I do know is that we are asking all volunteer, there's an online packet, and the school office, the secretaries and the school office assistants, they know how to direct volunteers to that packet. I believe we probably have them printed as well at sites. That's what we typically do. But everything goes to our HR office. So HR knows of every single volunteer on our campuses. So, it's like you, if you think of us as this, the support center here, we're communicating with our schools. We know who's on our campuses, and that's the ultimate goal.
All right, does President Holt, are there any additional questions? Seeing none, I move that we approve resolution 22-23-26, general liability coverage and workers' compensation for volunteer personnel.
Sarah Brickler, I'll second. And then I'll start with, we kind of do it offset after one resolution vote. So how about Vice President Wedge? Trustee Dowd?
Aye.
Clerk Brickler, aye. Trustee Ross? President Holt?
Aye. The resolution passes. All right, moving to item 12D, English Learner Master Plan revisions.
So AUSD has put together an English Learner Master Plan, and this work started basically 4 years ago. And 4 years ago, we were looking into what Auburn does to support English learners, right? And really have a plan in place to follow, like the roadmap, like what the FICMAT presentation was really about. And so, as always, you do your research, you put together your plan, and then you implement, and then you look at the data, and then you revise. So every year I have brought back revisions to the English Learner Master Plan. So again, this will be an annual thing that you will see probably pretty much in June. there were some changes that we made specifically regarding program staff being updated. We've gone through a process this year with PCOE. Kathy Anderson worked side by side with Leslie Riston of PCOE to really develop the right master plan for our students, looking at data, who does what are the processes. So we're not overburdening some staff, but not having other staff do jobs that they could be doing. And and you've heard a similar story today with the FICMAT presentation again. So what we're doing is trying to really create this system that could really run without someone's name at the wheel, because the system works so well, right? So some of the revisions were updating program staff, defining the overview of how we implement the supports for our English learners, English language development expectations, and our district expectations that surround that instructional piece. There's tables with roles and responsibilities. This was key for us because, again, one person doing it all is not a sustainable system. Sure, we could do it, and we do work late into the night sometimes, absolutely. But is that sustainable? Absolutely not. Because you take me out of the equation or someone else doing it out of the equation, the system falls flat, right? And that's what we are trying to avoid. So those are some of the changes that we've made to this EL master plan. The plan will change again because we're continuing this work every year. Our students' needs change, right? And so we change with it. And ultimately the goal is the students' needs are changing because we are elevating them. We're reclassifying them sooner. You know, we're more capable of providing the supports they need. And so that's going to have to change as well. Administration recommends approval of the English Learner Master Plan revisions.
This is President Holt. Are there any questions?
When is our next opportunity to hear about progress being made by our English learners? I mean, unfortunately, I missed the reclassification event that was held at E.V. Kane. And I know that there's a lot of progress being made, but when is the next chance that we'll, hear how this master plan is working in practice?
So we will have, our data will be in, compiled and ready to go somewhere around the fall. I believe that we reported out last in October.
But I have a little bit of data that I could share right now about reclassification. So,
If you would please step to the microphone. Thank you.
This is Kathy Anderson. So our LPAC scores for our summative LPAC, they returned a lot faster than they have in years past.
Yeah.
And just this spring, we had 40 students of 173 students who took the summative LPAC, potentially reclassify. So what that means is they scored a 4 on the LPAC, so they are proficient in English. There are other criteria that we look at in the master plan, but the sites looked at those, and that's how the sites were holding reclassification events in the spring. So we had almost 40 students reclassified.
Yay.
So
Out of 173 district-wide?
that was 173 students that took the summative LPAC.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. And this is President Holt again. Are there any additional questions? All right. Then I move that we approve the English Learner Master Plan revisions.
Sarah Brickler, I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And those opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. Moving to item 12E, revisions to the 2023 Educator Effectiveness Block Grant Plan.
This is Michelle Lucci Garcia. The Educator Effectiveness Block Grant Fund is intended to support professional learning for teachers and staff and administrators, right? So all who are educating students. And so last year maybe it was 2021, we brought you this plan. It's meshing together. We brought you this plan and initially with some items on it that we are no longer doing. And so I wanted to revise this and bring it back to you and explain some of those changes. So the funding for the 22-23 instructional coach program, we initially were going to fund this 2022-23 program with different special funds, but instead we chose to leave it with the EEBG grant, just mainly because that's what our coaches do, that they provide professional development. So it made more sense to fund 2 years of coaching out of this program. There's a reduction in cost of guided reading. While our teachers are implementing guided reading, it's not a mandate, it's a supplement, and they're doing a wonderful job, and they're loving it. But our coaches and our teacher leaders that know guided reading we've built some capacity there. So we no longer want to continue to work with a consultant. So we dropped that cost off. We will be having professional learning community PLC train. Well, I'm doing better with acronyms than words tonight. Training this coming fall, which I had explained to the board a couple months ago, like really as part of that, bringing people back together. And we already have PLCs. And we're already looking at data through the MTSS process, but really redefining what PLCs are and just bringing it back to the core basics. I know that Auburn had training several years ago on that. And so some teachers had that training, but we have new teachers that have not. I originally put a lot more money into that until I found out that PCOE actually can work with us on providing that training to our staff, which is wonderful. So I reduced the cost just because the cost of that training by PCOE is less than going with a private company. And then you'll see there's additional trauma-informed training. We have included individualized education program training. We are, as you know, in CIM, and that is continuous improvement monitoring for basically for the need to have more training for IEPs, just to make that simple. And so we went back, our team did, and we decided that if there's an area of need there, we should be putting professional development funding into that area of need. So we did write that in as well. And again, we're working with our county partners there. So the cost to us is significantly less than using a private company. Plus, we know our county partners. They work with us in a variety of areas. So it's that comfortable partnership where we have built trust. English language training on the standards, the framework. So the framework is huge because the framework is huge, but that training and that understanding of the framework is really important. And we're at that level, at that next step now where we're ready to get to that level of really understanding the framework and the standards to serve our English learners. As you hear our data, we're reclassifying students at the EVK and reclassification event. There were many students that now can go on to high school and choose electives. But we want to continue that trend. So anyway, those are just some of the changes. There are more bulleted out here. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Administration recommends approval of the revisions to the EEBG block grant.
What is the plan to fund instructional coaches after in 24-25? Because I see that we have that budgeted here for 2 years, ending with the upcoming 23-24 school year.
We have an additional block grant that I'm looking at. So, as we continue to monitor the effectiveness of our programs, we always look out to what the next funding source is. I do have a block grant in mind. And so as we get closer, I'll bring more details of that.
Thank you.
President Holt, are there any additional questions?
No, it just looks like it's almost spent down at the end of 23-24. There's just maybe like less than 10,000 remaining for 24-25, and then I think it's all spent for that final year. But are the reporting requirements year to year significant? Is there any advantage to trying to like completely spend it by the end of 23-24?
Well, there's a need right now for the programs that we're funding. And then then there will be other ways to, so we still have Title II money to fund PD. We still have other ways to make sure that we're funding PD. But my thought was when we get to the end of 2025, we will have built such capacity in our district that we'll have that system really moving, and our staff will be highly trained and able to support each other and new teachers coming in. That's always the goal. But of course, there will always be, in my opinion, something else that comes along to fund the programs that we need. That's just what I've noticed being in education. And I wouldn't want to hang on to money and then potentially lose it because I couldn't do the program.
Yeah.
You know, and I go back to thinking about COVID, which I rarely try to do, but in this case, there was money on the table that we couldn't spend because we couldn't get staff. And I can't predict 3 years out, where we'll exactly be. I mean, we always try to, that's what we do. 3 to 5 year plan is always in our head. But the goal would be to build capacity now when we know this is the need, and then pivot and adjust. And as, like I said, what we wrote in 2021 has changed, which is why I brought this back to you. It could be that there's some major change again, and then I bring this back, to you again with those changes.
Thank you. I move that we approve the revisions to the 2023 Educator Effectiveness Block Grant Plan.
That was Clerk Brickler.
I'll second that. Vice President Wedge.
This is President Holt. All in favor? Aye.
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 And those opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. And moving to item 12F, 2023 LCAP federal addendum revisions.
So the federal addendum supplements the LCAP, and it's really meant to ensure that we have the opportunity as a district to meet the provisions of the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is ESSA. The federal addendum is reviewed and revised annually with our LCAP. It doesn't inform the LCAP, but we do have to go through a series of self-evaluation. So again, I'm going to go back to that self-evaluation tool for FICMAT. This is a similar idea where a team of us get together and we look at where are we with implementation of some of the things that we said we were going to implement. And so each year this will come back to you. It came to you last year. You will see this year our self-reflection shows that we are further down the line with curriculum implementation, with the training that supports it and that type of thing. So there's not a requirement to get this approved again by the CDE. The only requirement to do that was in 2019. It's actually the first thing I did when I came on board because it was late. And as of my first day of hire. And so I worked feverishly on this. Since then, I've come to understand it more and understand our district more. So I feel very confident that each year as we bring this to you, not only will you see our growth as a district toward meeting those standards, but also how far we've come. It tells our story. Administration recommends approval of the federal addendum revisions.
This is President Holt. Are there any questions on that? Seeing none, I move to approve the 2023 LCAP federal addendum revisions.
Trustee Dowd, I second.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 And those opposed? All right, seeing none, the motion carries. And this is still President Holt. Moving to item 13, comments, 13A, comments from trustees related to the monthly school site reports. Are there any comments this month? Okay, seeing none and seeing that it's 8:46, we'll keep trucking along to item 14, board governance, 14A, board policy updates.
So the board policy updates that that you have access to are for you to read through. And then the second read will be on the next board agenda. Administration recommends,
That we read it.
that you read it.
This is President Holt.
You read it.
I just want to clarify, it looks like there was a typo on there. The language is borrowed, I think, from our March meeting. So just want to clarify that it looks like the
Oh,
was
I
a
see.
typo. So we aren't approving tonight, but this is a first read.
Thank
and we
you.
will approve at our
Yep.
August or September meeting. August?
August.
Okay.
Thank you for correcting that.
Still President Holt. Moving on to 14B and board direction requests. Update on requests. We have any tonight?
So there was a request to look into having a student board member, and I was thinking we could address that on Saturday and make that part of our conversation at the governance workshop.
Thank you.
Okay, and this is President Holt again, moving to new requests.
This is Trustee Ross. I have a couple requests. After watching the IB presentation, thank you so much. I'm back. Hello. After watching the IB presentation, I would like to request a feasibility study for IB school capability. I don't have a set date on that because we're about to go into summer. So, you know, once we return into school, I would love to start looking at that feasibility study. I don't know if we need to get a 3 on that before.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And then my second request, and I believe this was already brought up. I just want to make sure that it is something that we've requested and it's on yours, but we want to, I would like to request what our physical plan looks like to change our no's to yes. I know we've changed a lot of those to yes, but I'd love to see what our plan entails and what the dates are on that.
On the FICMAT tool.
On the FICMAT tool. And then I think we also asked the request to see what that self-assessment tool does look like and who is holding that accountable. Like who is the top person who's holding that other person accountable? What does the accountability plan look like? And I think we do need to get a 3 on that.
This is President Holt. Just to kind of clarify, I think on that though, when we brought it up kind of during the discussion, I think we were suggesting August for that first self-assessment and then 6 months from there. So yeah, you definitely got my consent that we look at that.
So I think we were talking about an update in August about what progress has been made on those items. And then later, I think I don't know if it's all the same, but like the using it as a self-evaluation tool at a later date. I don't know if it's all the same. Yeah.
I thought CBO was suggesting that we would do that self-assessment kind of initially in August. I'm okay with doing that at that February timeline. So I'm okay with even kind of pushing that self-assessment, I think, out till then, since we just had FICMAT come through.
Okay.
But that we do have that kind of report and plan to be presented to us in August.
And yeah, and who's going to oversee the checks and balances, who's going to be
Right.
checking and balancing that.
Well, yeah.
Perfect. That's in the process. And then my third request was, I believe this was also mentioned, and again, I just want to verify that it is a request, but we wanted to see what the state of our current portables are, what needs to get done so that we can get our students safely in there. So if we could get that or walk through, I think we had requested either a walkthrough so we could see what the plan looks like, which I would recommend that we all walk through together and see what that plan looks like in person, so we can kind of double check for ourselves and then get that current state of the portables.
And I would definitely be interested, since that is what I do for a living. I would love to
That'd be great.
spend some time and walk through it. So.
And that was Vice President Wedge.
This is Trustee Brickler, and I had some requests that were related to Trustee Ross. I had asked earlier about what the enrollment projections are, knowing that that's fluid, but wondering how we can. It seems like there's a lot of kind of pressure on the Auburn site, and how we could alleviate some of that pressure and what options there might be. Which also led me to ask what the plans are for Rock Creek. I understand that there will be 2 preschool programs there, but
Possibly a church.
oh, really? I haven't heard that. I don't know what our plans are to utilize that site. I had also asked about the funding determination for Alta Vista and whether there's any possibility of since it's fully funded as a homeschool program, if that can be pursued or if it's too late in the closure process. And I guess it's not really a new request, but I'm going to try to take some of the historic artifacts. I need to connect with Rock Creek and from Rock Creek in both Auburn, or sorry, and Alta Vista, and see how we can try to preserve those somewhere.
We do have the archival historic museum out in DeWitt that holds some of our school stuff already. Just FYI, might be a place to start.
So I like to go back down this list and make sure that all of the 6 new requests that the board is in agreement and that I have the language accurate. And then let me know if it's a report that you would like in a board meeting, a presentation, what the format would be. So a feasibility study for IB, and that would be in the fall. And I can imagine you would want that to be, would you want that to be a presentation or an outcome? Like, would you want the outcome of that? How would you like that presented?
I believe they said there was a tool already that existed on the website. So if we could just see, I think the results should be listed. I looked at one. So whatever that tool is listed on there, I'd like to see kind of that format.
Okay. And I believe that the majority of the board agreed with that. Okay, perfect. And then the physical plan to change the no's to yeses on the FICMAT tool. I just wrote that down like you said it. And then a self-assessment tool, and what is accountability? What does our accountability plan look like? And then we talked about a progress check-in. So I'm assuming that would be a presentation of some sort in August, and then that self-eval tool around February, March. Is that accurate? Okay. And then the state of the portables, what needs to be done, and then a walkthrough. So is that something that each individual board member would schedule, or that we would all do? Well, following the Brown Act?
Can we do a special board? Can we take our special board meeting there? Can we do a special board meeting at Auburn Elementary where that's our special board meeting? We walk through, or just not on
Part of our board workshop on Saturday.
Yeah, or part of our board workshop at some
We could
point.
have our board workshop in one of the portables.
So you're trying to test me to see if I know all this. Yeah. That's a great question. I would say no more than 2, because it would be school business. Yeah. And well, as a special board meeting, but then, those are, the agenda's already set. So that would have to be unless we call another special board meeting.
Yeah, so why don't we just try to schedule those in groups of no more than 2?
Schedule. Okay, perfect. Okay.
And then I have one more last request.
And then the enrollment projections. Yeah.
And again, Trustee Ross, first of all, thank you so much for taking those requests. My last request was, I heard you mention that our Title I funds are going from our schools that have the Title I students to our whole district. And I'm not sure I understand how that works. So I don't know if I need to request something with you where I sit down and you can walk me through that, or is there something you can kind of show all of us how that works? Because you're now taking funds from one school that needs it and pouring it out to all the schools that may or may not need it. And I'm just curious how that kind of works.
Okay.
It's to follow the unduplicated student, right? You said that earlier.
So yeah, if we could see how that process works, that might be. And if it's just me, I'll just make an appointment with you.
Okay.
That might work best, kind of a one-on-one.
Perfect. Thank you then.
And then the funding determination was the final request. That you have a report out on that. Or
yeah,
the enrollment projections that you started to read. Sorry, this President Holt. The enrollment projections with a note, especially on the pressure at Auburn L and what's being done with Rock Creek's campus in the next year. And then the funding determination regarding Alta Vista.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any additional new requests? Nope. In that case, this meeting is adjourned at 8:56.